And I'm asking, what do you think? Is wind energy a viable option? Now, a lot of these energy experts have said that the UK should increase the rate at which offshore wind turbines are installed so that the country can stop relying on energy imports. Now, last year, offshore wind energy generated around about 12% of the UK's electricity. Nuclear produced about 15%, whilst gas made up 40%. But there are concerns that the environmental impacts of wind turbines, including the potential to degrade habitats, are an issue. So for our debate this hour, I'm asking, is wind energy a viable option? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and also former Liberal Democrat MP, Lembit Öpik. I have to come to Lembit Öpik first because there's no climate emergency. That's what he always says. Wind energy, is it all a bit of a joke? I mean, it does produce something, it's useful, but is the payback?
In some circumstances, it can be useful. Remote environments where you have, for example, decent storage, and I don't mean lithium-ion batteries, that's a terrible use of resources. Something called sodium salt batteries can do it. So sometimes it works. But the idea that we can power our national grid and the baseload, that's the minimum you always need. Why are you laughing at me?
Well, I'm just thinking that if the wind stops, the lights go out.
It's worse than that. If the wind stops, you've got a high pressure, which is really cold in the winter, and it's night time. You have to do what Brian Katz said, and Angela Knight as well, who I'm glad to say sees the technical importance of having informed politicians on this. You have to have what's called spinning reserve, the same amount from somewhere else. Otherwise, lights go out. I can't believe Rishi Sunak saying he's willing to have blackouts. He's talking about it for pricing purposes, but you don't need to worry about the pricing, because if the grid runs out of power, then the lights go out anyway. It's insane, Nana. You cannot run a first world country with wind and solar, and you can't do it anywhere in the world, actually. We can't make nuclear quickly because it takes 30 or 40 years to get the agreement, maybe 20 if you're lucky. You can do gas, but we're too scared to take it out of the ground because of the nutty green lobbyists who tell you that there's a climate emergency, and guess what? There isn't.
OK, right, but Rishi...
Had to get there in the end.
I knew it. But Rishi Sunak would say that because he's very rich and he won't have a blackout, even if we all do. What do you think?
Look, I just think this pursuit to net zero is madness. It's insanity. It's unrealistic. We've got oil fields, billions of gallons of oil still in the North Sea. Get it out. We should be using that, and we should... I mean, offshore wind turbines are fine if you're going to have them, but we don't want them on the countryside because they're destroying the environment. And yes, if it's not windy, they don't work. And then sometimes, if they're really working flat out, they can't harness the excess energy either. They can't store it. So wind energy is a joke. So I'm afraid we've got to... Blair and Brown have got as much to blame as this, because they had no energy policy when they were in power. There was no nuclear policy. Germany made the same mistake. We've got to get on with nuclear, but as Lembit says, it takes a long time. But in the short term, let's talk about fracking, and let's talk about getting some oil out of the ground.
I'd go further. I'd open the coal mines as well.
Yep.
I'd take it all. I just don't... As much as, you know, this whole CO2 thing, this whole net zero thing, I'm sorry, but I'm just not...
And there's a coal mine behind the Red Wall that Boris Johnson was going to agree to give the go-ahead, and then it wasn't going to give the go-ahead. Get it going.
But to cut the things, my father was a nuclear physicist, so in my teens I was obviously against nuclear physics because you have to oppose your father. Yeah. When I got older, and I was Shadow Minister for Energy for the Lib Dems, I said, I'm going to look at this for 2 years. I had to change my view. My dad was right all along, because nuclear power, notwithstanding the problems you get in conflict zones like in Ukraine, nuclear power is profoundly safe if you look at the overall number of deaths from that. But the thing is, it's dead reliable. It doesn't need sunshine, it doesn't need wind. And this coal point that you've both inferred, the reason I say there's no climate crisis is because literally, and this sounds counterintuitive to some of your viewers, there is no way that CO2 can be wrecking our climate. Just no way. It's 0.04% of our atmosphere, of which we add 3.5%. Now think about that. That's 1/33 of 1/400th of our climate, of our atmosphere. That's not affecting it, but that's the reason we've got these balmy policies. That's why we're not taking £1 trillion worth of gas from under our feet, and we're giving the economic initiative to Russia, India and China, who have no intention at all of following our crazy lead. No.